What happens when a moment of crisis reveals truths that the British royal family never intended the world to discover? When the Duchess of Cambridge collapsed during a routine public engagement, nobody expected that a young guard's quick thinking would uncover a web of secrets that had been carefully hidden within the palace walls for decades. This is not just another royal story about duty and tradition. This is the shocking account of how one fainting spell led to the discovery of hidden documents, forgotten rooms, and family secrets that could have changed the course of British history. A story where loyalty is tested, ancient protocols are broken, and the very foundations of royal privacy are shattered by an act of human kindness. The truth, as they say, has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. And sometimes, it takes just one person doing the right thing to bring down walls that have stood for generations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Kensington Palace, as Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, prepared for what should have been a routine visit to the children's hospital. She had done hundreds of these engagements before, each one carefully planned and rehearsed by her team of advisors. But this Tuesday in October felt different somehow, though she couldn't quite place why. James Morrison, a 26-year-old guard, who had been stationed at the palace for just 8 months, watched from his post near the main entrance as the royal convoy prepared to depart. He had joined the Royal Protection Unit straight from military service, carrying with him the sharp instincts and attention to detail that had kept him alive during 2 tours in Afghanistan. Something about the Duchess's demeanor caught his eye that morning. While she smiled and waved at the small crowd of staff who had gathered to see her off, he noticed the slight tremor in her hands and the way she seemed to grip the car door a moment longer than usual before stepping inside. The drive to St. Mary's Children's Hospital took 35 minutes through London's busy streets. Catherine sat in the back seat, reviewing her notes for the visit, but the words seemed to blur together on the page. She had been feeling unwell for the past few days, attributing it to the stress of recent royal duties and the constant scrutiny that came with her position. The palace physician had assured her it was nothing more than exhaustion, recommending rest that she simply couldn't afford to take with her packed schedule. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's chief pediatrician, waited nervously in the lobby for the royal arrival. She had spent weeks preparing for this visit, knowing how much it would mean to the young patients and their families. The hospital had recently opened a new wing dedicated to cancer treatment for children, and the Duchess's visit was meant to bring attention and much-needed funding to their programs. Everything had to be perfect. When the convoy arrived at the hospital, Catherine stepped out with her usual grace, despite the growing dizziness that she fought to conceal. The crowd of onlookers cheered, cameras flashed, and she moved through the choreographed greetings with practiced ease. James, who had accompanied the security detail, positioned himself strategically where he could observe both the crowd and the Duchess. His training had taught him to watch for signs of distress in protected individuals, and something in Catherine's posture set off alarm bells in his mind. The tour began in the new cancer ward, where Catherine was introduced to several young patients and their families. She knelt beside hospital beds, listening to stories of courage and hope that would have moved anyone to tears. 8-year-old Lucy, who was battling leukemia, presented the Duchess with a hand-drawn picture of the palace. Catherine's eyes welled up as she accepted the gift, her emotional response genuine and heartfelt. But as they moved from room to room, Catherine's condition deteriorated. The hospital corridors felt increasingly narrow, and the fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with an uncomfortable intensity. She tried to maintain her composure, continuing to smile and engage with the children, but James noticed how she began to lean more heavily on the handrails, and how her responses became shorter and less animated. The critical moment came during the visit to the hospital's new therapy room. Catherine was being shown the state-of-the-art equipment when she suddenly swayed. Dr. Chen, who had been explaining the benefits of the new treatment protocols, stopped mid-sentence when she saw the Duchess's face go pale. James stepped forward instinctively, his military training kicking in as he recognized the signs of an impending collapse. Time seemed to slow as Catherine's knees buckled. The room erupted in controlled chaos as her security team moved to create a protective barrier, but it was James who reached her first. With careful precision, he caught her before she could hit the floor, supporting her weight as he guided her to a nearby chair. His actions were swift but gentle, ensuring her dignity remained intact even in this vulnerable moment. The hospital staff immediately sprang into action, with Dr. Chen taking charge of the medical response while the royal press secretary worked to manage the situation with the media present. Catherine regained consciousness within moments, insisting she was fine and wanted to continue the visit, but it was clear that she needed immediate medical attention. James remained at his post, but his mind was racing. During those crucial seconds when he had caught the Duchess, something unusual had happened. As he had steadied her, a small, ornate key had fallen from her jacket pocket, landing silently on the carpeted floor. In the confusion that followed, only James had noticed it. Acting on instinct, he had discreetly picked up the key, intending to return it to her personal protection officer later. But as he examined the key more closely, during a quiet moment, he realized this wasn't just any ordinary key. It was old, made of heavy brass with intricate engravings that looked centuries old. Along the shaft were tiny symbols that resembled a royal crest, and at the head was an inscription in Latin that he couldn't translate. This was clearly something of significance, something that the Duchess had been carrying with her for reasons unknown. The decision to quietly investigate the key rather than immediately returning it would later be seen as the moment everything changed. James understood that his actions could be viewed as a breach of protocol, but something about the key's appearance and the way Catherine had been carrying it so carefully suggested there was more to this story than a simple medical episode. That evening, back at Kensington Palace, James found himself unable to concentrate on his duties. The key seemed to burn in his pocket, and questions swirled through his mind. Why would the Duchess be carrying such an obviously historical artifact? What did the Latin inscription mean, and, most importantly, what was she planning to do with it? The official reports of the day's events made no mention of any key, describing the incident simply as a brief fainting spell due to exhaustion. Catherine had recovered quickly and was said to be resting comfortably at home. The hospital visit was deemed a success despite the medical scare, with the media focusing on her dedication to continuing the engagement even while feeling unwell. But James knew there was more to the story. As he walked the palace corridors during his late shift, he found himself studying the architecture with new eyes, wondering if somewhere within these ancient walls was a lock that matched the mysterious key he now carried. The weight of the secret he bore was both thrilling and terrifying, and he knew that his next actions would determine not just his own future, but potentially the future of royal secrets that had been hidden for generations. The palace settled into its nighttime routine, but James Morrison remained awake, staring at the ornate key and wondering what door it might open, and what truths lay waiting behind it. Little did he know that his decision to investigate would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy, and reveal secrets that powerful people had worked for decades to keep hidden. The morning would bring new questions, new discoveries, and the beginning of a journey that would test every loyalty James thought he understood. The key was just the beginning, a small brass gateway to a mystery that stretched back through centuries of royal history and forward into a future that no one could have predicted. As Big Ben chimed midnight over London, James made his decision. He would find what the key unlocked, no matter the consequences. The truth, whatever it might be, deserved to see the light of day. And somewhere in the darkness of Kensington Palace, that truth was waiting to be discovered. The next morning brought an unusual tension to Kensington Palace. James Morrison reported for his shift with dark circles under his eyes, having spent most of the night researching the symbols on the mysterious key. Using his personal laptop in his small apartment, he had managed to translate part of the Latin inscription, Veritas liberabit vos, the truth will set you free. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now harboring a secret that could potentially destroy his career. Catherine had returned to her royal duties, appearing at a morning engagement at a local school where she seemed to have fully recovered from the previous day's incident. The palace had released a brief statement attributing her fainting spell to a minor stomach bug, and the media had largely moved on to other stories. But James noticed something different about her demeanor when she returned to the palace that afternoon. She seemed anxious, frequently checking her jacket pockets and speaking in hushed tones with her private secretary. During his lunch break, James made his way to the palace library, a vast repository of books and documents that chronicled centuries of royal history. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, had been working in the palace for over 40 years and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of royal artifacts and their significance. James approached her carefully, knowing that his questions needed to seem casual and professional. He showed Mrs. Whitmore a photograph he had taken of the key, claiming it was part of a security assessment to catalog historical items around the palace. Her reaction was immediate and startling. The color drained from her face, and she glanced around nervously before pulling James into a private alcove between the towering bookshelves. Mrs. Whitmore revealed that she recognized the key from historical documents she had seen decades earlier. According to her knowledge, it belonged to a private study that had been sealed sometime in the 1950s, following what she described as a very delicate family matter. She had always assumed the room and its contents had been destroyed or relocated, but the existence of the key suggested otherwise. The study, she explained, had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II's uncle Prince George, Duke of Kent, who had died in a mysterious plane crash in 1942. The official story was that he was on a military mission when his aircraft crashed in Scotland, but Mrs. Whitmore had heard whispers over the years that there had been more to the story. Some documents and personal effects had been sealed away after his death, supposedly to protect family privacy during wartime. James felt a chill run down his spine as Mrs. Whitmore continued her explanation. The sealed study was rumored to contain documents that could shed light on Prince George's activities during the early years of World War II, a period when several members of European royal families had complex relationships with various political factions. The decision to seal the room had reportedly been made by King George VI himself, Prince George's brother, to protect the monarchy's reputation during a critical time in British history. Mrs. Whitmore's knowledge extended to the possible location of this sealed study. According to the palace plans she had access to, there was an area in the East Wing that had been renovated in the 1950s, with what appeared to be a room that had simply been walled off rather than repurposed. The architectural drawings showed an inconsistency in the floor plan that had always puzzled her, but she had never had reason to investigate further. That afternoon, James volunteered for additional security rounds, giving him an opportunity to explore the East Wing more thoroughly. The area was used mainly for storage and administrative offices, making it less heavily trafficked than other parts of the palace. Armed with Mrs. Whitmore's information and his own growing determination, he began a systematic search for signs of the hidden study. The breakthrough came when he noticed a section of wall that looked slightly different from the rest. The wallpaper pattern matched perfectly, but the wall itself seemed to protrude just a few inches more than the surrounding areas. Running his hands along the surface, he could feel what seemed like a doorframe hidden beneath layers of wallpaper and plaster. His heart racing, James realized he was standing in front of what could be Prince George's sealed study, but finding the room and actually entering it were two very different challenges. He needed to be certain of what he had found, and he needed to find a way to access it without triggering the palace's sophisticated security systems. Meanwhile, Catherine's anxiety about her missing key was becoming more apparent. James observed her speaking urgently with her personal protection officer, and he overheard fragments of conversation about finding something important and checking the car again. It was clear that she knew the key was missing and was desperately trying to locate it. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on James's mind. He could simply return the key and pretend nothing had happened, likely earning gratitude and avoiding any potential consequences. But the historian and truth-seeker in him was fascinated by the possibility of uncovering historical facts that had been hidden for over 70 years. The inscription on the key seemed to mock him, "The truth will set you free." That evening, James made contact with Dr. Michael Harrison, a historian specializing in World War II and royal history, whom he had found through online research. Dr. Harrison taught at Cambridge University and had written extensively about the British monarchy during wartime. James arranged to meet him at a pub near the university, using his day off to make the trip. Harrison's expertise proved invaluable. When James showed him photographs of the key and described the possible connection to Prince George, the historian's interest was immediately piqued. Dr. Harrison explained that there had long been academic speculation about missing documents related to Prince George's death and his activities during the early war years. Several historians had tried to access royal archives but had been consistently denied, leading to theories about what might be hidden. According to Dr. Harrison, Prince George had been involved in several diplomatic missions during 1940 and 1941, some of which were never fully documented in public records. There were suggestions that he had been exploring potential peace negotiations with certain German officials, activities that would have been highly controversial if they had become public during or after the war. The decision to classify these activities and seal related documents would have made perfect sense from the perspective of protecting both national security and royal reputation. Dr. Kaya Simon P. Harrison also provided James with crucial technical information about how to safely document historical findings. If James decided to proceed with investigating the sealed study, he would need to photograph everything carefully and systematically, ensuring that any discoveries could be properly authenticated and preserved. The historian stressed the importance of not disturbing original documents more than necessary and maintaining detailed records of everything found. The conversation with Dr. Harrison transformed James's understanding of what he might be dealing with. This wasn't just about satisfying curiosity. He potentially held the key to resolving historical questions that had puzzled scholars for decades. The weight of this responsibility was both exhilarating and terrifying. Returning to London that evening, James felt the full magnitude of his situation. He possessed a key that could unlock 70-year-old royal secrets. He had located what he believed to be the sealed study, and he had the knowledge necessary to properly document any findings. The only question remaining was whether he had the courage to proceed. As he walked through the palace corridors during his night shift, James studied Catherine's movements and demeanor with new understanding. She wasn't just missing a family heirloom or personal keepsake. She had been entrusted with access to historical secrets and was clearly distressed by the key's disappearance. Her behavior suggested that she, or someone in the royal family, had been planning to access the sealed study for reasons unknown. The realization that Catherine might have been on the verge of uncovering these secrets herself added another layer of complexity to James's decision. Was she planning to reveal the hidden history, or was she working to ensure it remained buried? Her motivations were as mysterious as the contents of the room he had discovered. By dawn, James had made his choice. The truth, whatever it might reveal, deserved to be known. Historical facts shouldn't remain hidden simply to protect reputations or avoid uncomfortable questions about the past. But he also knew that his actions would need to be carefully planned and executed. One mistake could not only end his career but potentially create an international incident. The key felt heavier in his pocket as the morning shift began, weighted down by the significance of what it represented. In just a few hours, James would attempt to unlock a door that had been sealed for over 7 decades, not knowing whether he would find historical treasures, uncomfortable truths, or something that would change his understanding of the royal family forever. The palace awakened to another day of royal duties and public engagements, but hidden within its ancient walls, a secret that had been carefully guarded for generations was about to see the light of day. James Morrison, a young guard who had simply been trying to help during a medical emergency, was about to become the key figure in one of the most significant historical discoveries of the modern era. As he prepared for what could be the most important day of his life, James reflected on how quickly everything had changed. Yesterday, he had been an ordinary palace guard. Today, he held the power to rewrite history books and challenge everything people thought they knew about the British royal family during World War II. The morning of James Morrison's planned investigation dawned gray and misty over London, as if the weather itself was reflecting the uncertainty of what lay ahead. James had spent the previous night finalizing his preparations, studying the palace security schedules, and identifying a 2-hour window during the afternoon shift change when the East Wing would be minimally monitored. He carried with him a small digital camera, latex gloves, and a tactical flashlight, all items that wouldn't seem unusual for a security officer to possess. Catherine's desperation to locate her missing key had intensified overnight. James observed her making unusual requests to the palace maintenance staff, asking them to search areas where she had never actually been during the previous day's events. Her behavior confirmed his suspicions that the key's importance went far beyond sentimental value. She knew exactly what it unlocked, and she needed it back urgently. At precisely 2:30 p.m., during the scheduled maintenance break when security cameras in the East Wing were temporarily disabled for routine system updates, James made his move. The corridor was empty as he approached the section of wall he had identified. His hands trembled slightly as he examined the hidden door frame more carefully, looking for any additional security measures that might have been installed over the decades. Finding none, James inserted the ornate brass key into what appeared to be solid wall. To his amazement, the key slid smoothly into a hidden lock mechanism that had been concealed behind the wallpaper. The click of tumblers falling into place echoed softly in the empty corridor, and James felt a section of the wall give way under gentle pressure. The hidden door swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway that led to a small, windowless room. The air that escaped carried the musty scent of decades-old paper and leather, mixed with the faint aroma of furniture polish and pipe tobacco. James stepped inside and carefully closed the door behind him before switching on his flashlight. The beam of light revealed a study that appeared to have been frozen in time since the 1940s. Heavy wooden furniture dominated the space, including an ornate desk covered with papers, a leather armchair positioned near a cold fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes on history, politics, and military strategy. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, but remarkably well preserved given the room's age. James's first discovery was a collection of documents spread across the desk, as if Prince George had been working on them moments before leaving the room for the final time. The papers included correspondence written in German, maps of various European locations, and what appeared to be diplomatic proposals written in multiple languages. His heart raced as he realized he was looking at potentially explosive historical evidence. Using his camera, James began systematically photographing everything he found. The German correspondence appeared to be communications between Prince George and various officials in Nazi Germany, but the content suggested these were not treasonous communications. Instead, they seemed to be part of an elaborate intelligence-gathering operation, with Prince George serving as a conduit for information about German military plans and political intentions. One particularly significant document was a detailed report in Prince George's handwriting, dated September 1941, describing conversations he had conducted with high-ranking German officials who were secretly opposed to Hitler's regime. The report outlined their plans for a potential coup against the Nazi leadership and their desire to negotiate a separate peace with Britain. This was historical dynamite, proving that there had been active resistance within Germany's highest levels much earlier than previously documented. The bookshelf revealed additional treasures, including Prince George's personal journals, covering the period from 1930 until just days before his death in 1942. James carefully photographed pages that detailed clandestine meetings, coded communications, and the prince's growing belief that his intelligence work was becoming increasingly dangerous. The final entries suggested that Prince George suspected his cover had been blown and that his life might be in danger. Perhaps most shocking was a sealed envelope marked "For my brother's eyes only" in Prince George's handwriting. Inside, James found a detailed confession explaining the full scope of the intelligence operation, names of German contacts who were working against the Nazi regime, and a complete account of information that had been passed to British military intelligence. The letter also contained Prince George's growing concerns that elements within both the German and British governments might want him silenced to prevent his activities from becoming public. The implications were staggering. If these documents were authentic, they proved that Prince George's death in 1942 might not have been the accident it was portrayed as. His intelligence work had put him at the center of a dangerous web of international intrigue, and his death had effectively ended a potentially crucial intelligence operation that could have shortened the war or prevented countless casualties. James also discovered a hidden compartment within the desk that contained photographs and additional documents. The photograph showed Prince George meeting with individuals who were later identified as key figures in the German resistance movement. The documents included coded messages that had been decoded by hand, revealing detailed information about German military positions and planned operations. As James continued his systematic documentation, he began to understand why this room had been sealed so quickly after Prince George's death. The information contained within these walls would have been incredibly sensitive during wartime, and its revelation could have compromised ongoing intelligence operations and endangered the lives of German resistance fighters who were still operating behind enemy lines. But the most significant discovery came when James found a modern addition to the room's contents, a folder marked with Catherine's personal seal, containing contemporary documents that were clearly related to the historical materials. These papers included genealogical research, historical analysis, and what appeared to be a plan for gradually releasing information about Prince George's true activities during the war. The contemporary documents revealed that Catherine had been working with a select group of historians and intelligence experts to determine how best to handle the historical revelations. Her research suggested that she believed the time had come to acknowledge Prince George's heroic role in intelligence gathering and to honor his contribution to the war effort, rather than allowing his reputation to remain clouded by decades of official silence. Catherine's notes also indicated that she had been planning to present her findings to the Queen and other senior royals, seeking permission to begin a carefully managed disclosure process. The fainting episode that had caused her to lose the key had apparently occurred on the day she was scheduled to make this crucial presentation to the family. James realized that Catherine's distress about the missing key wasn't just about accessing historical information. She was worried about missing a critical window of opportunity to influence how this story was revealed to the world. Her research suggested that other historians were beginning to piece together elements of Prince George's story, and she wanted the royal family to control the narrative rather than having it exposed through unauthorized channels. The weight of this discovery was overwhelming. James found himself holding evidence that could rewrite World War II history, rehabilitate the reputation of a royal family member who had died under mysterious circumstances, and reveal intelligence operations that had remained classified for over 70 years. But he also held information that belonged to the current royal family and was part of an ongoing effort to address historical injustices. As his 2-hour window began to close, James completed his documentation and carefully returned everything to its original position. The room looked exactly as it had when he entered, but the world outside had fundamentally changed for him. He possessed knowledge that could alter public understanding of royal history and World War II intelligence operations. Before leaving the room, James took one final photograph of Prince George's personal letter to his brother, focusing on a passage that seemed to encapsulate the tragedy of the situation. History will judge us not by our intentions, but by our courage to serve truth over comfort. If these words are ever read, know that everything I did was in service of ending this war and saving lives, regardless of the personal cost. As James sealed the hidden door and made his way back through the palace corridors, his mind raced with the implications of what he had discovered. He carried with him not just historical evidence, but moral responsibility for ensuring that this information was handled appropriately. The truth he had uncovered was more complex and significant than he could have ever imagined. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as James returned to his normal duties, the memory of those dust-covered documents burning in his mind. He had entered that room as a curious guard following an unusual lead. He emerged as the keeper of secrets that could change how the world viewed both the British royal family and one of history's most significant conflicts. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. James understood that his actions in the coming days would determine not just his own fate, but potentially the fate of historical truth itself. The key in his pocket had unlocked far more than just a hidden room. It had opened a door to moral complexity that he was only beginning to understand. As the palace settled into its evening routine, James Morrison found himself at the center of a historical discovery that would test every principle he believed in and challenge every assumption about loyalty, truth, and the price of keeping secrets that perhaps were never meant to be kept forever. The morning after his discovery, James Morrison woke to find his world fundamentally changed. The weight of the historical evidence he had documented pressed down on him like a physical burden, and the moral complexity of his situation seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. He had spent the night analyzing the photographs he had taken, each image revealing new layers of significance that made his decision about what to do next even more challenging. Catherine's behavior had become increasingly erratic as her search for the missing key intensified. James observed her canceling scheduled engagements and spending long hours in private meetings with her personal staff. The palace rumor mill was beginning to whisper about possible health concerns or family troubles, but James understood the real source of her distress. Time was running out for her planned revelation, and without the key, she couldn't access the evidence she needed to support her case to the royal family. The turning point came during James's lunch break, when he witnessed a heated phone conversation between Catherine and an unknown individual. Speaking in hushed but urgent tones in what she believed was a private corner of the palace gardens, Catherine's words carried clearly to James's position nearby. She was speaking to someone about the deadline and losing control of the narrative, and the possibility that others might get there first. This conversation confirmed James's suspicions that Catherine's project was being driven by external pressures as much as internal royal family dynamics. Academic researchers and investigative journalists were apparently closing in on elements of Prince George's story, and Catherine was racing to get ahead of potential revelations that could damage the royal family if they emerged without proper context and preparation. That afternoon, James made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Rather than returning the key anonymously or attempting to blackmail anyone with his discoveries, he chose a path that honored both his loyalty to the crown and his commitment to historical truth. He requested a private meeting with Catherine, using official channels to ensure everything was properly documented and witnessed. The meeting was arranged for the following day in Catherine's private study at Kensington Palace, with her private secretary present as a witness. James approached the encounter with careful preparation, having spent hours rehearsing how he would explain his actions and present his proposal for moving forward. When Catherine entered the study, her composure was intact, but James could see the strain in her eyes. She clearly expected this meeting to be related to security matters or possibly her recent health episode. The moment James placed the ornate brass key on the table between them, her carefully maintained facade crumbled. The relief that flooded Catherine's face was immediately replaced by concern as she realized the implications of James possessing the key. Her first questions were practical. Had he accessed the room? What had he seen? Who else knew about his discovery? But as James began to explain his actions and motivations, her concern transformed into something approaching respect. James presented his case with military precision and diplomatic sensitivity. He acknowledged that his actions constituted a serious breach of protocol, and that he was prepared to face any consequences deemed appropriate. But he also explained his belief that the information he had discovered was too historically significant to remain hidden indefinitely, and that Catherine's own research suggested she agreed with this assessment. The conversation that followed lasted nearly 3 hours and covered territory that neither participant could have anticipated. Catherine revealed the full scope of her research project, explaining her years of investigation into Prince George's activities and her growing conviction that his true contribution to the war effort deserved recognition. She also shared her frustration with the royal family's traditional reluctance to address historical controversies, even when doing so might restore honor to unfairly maligned family members. James, in turn, shared his expertise in historical documentation and his connections with academic researchers who could help authenticate and contextualize the discoveries. His military background and security clearance gave him credibility in handling sensitive information, and his obvious respect for the institution of the monarchy reassured Catherine that he wasn't seeking personal gain or sensational publicity. The breakthrough in their discussion came when James suggested a collaborative approach that could serve both historical truth and royal family interests. Rather than forcing a confrontation between revelation and concealment, he proposed a carefully managed disclosure process that would honor Prince George's memory while demonstrating the current royal family's commitment to historical honesty and transparency. Catherine's private secretary, who had remained largely silent during the meeting, proved to be a crucial ally in developing this approach. Margaret Thornton had worked for the royal family for over 15 years and possessed extensive knowledge of media management and public relations. Her insights into how such a revelation could be positioned positively were invaluable in shaping their strategy. The plan they developed was both ambitious and carefully structured. They would begin by presenting the discoveries to a small group of senior royals, including the Queen, Prince William, and King Charles, along with selected historical experts and government officials with appropriate security clearances. This initial review would determine the best approach for eventual public disclosure, while ensuring that any living individuals who might be affected by the revelations were properly prepared and protected. The academic component of their plan involved partnering with respected historians and institutions to ensure that any public presentation of the information would meet the highest standards of scholarly rigor. Michael Harrison, whom James had already contacted, would serve as the lead academic consultant, working with teams from Cambridge, Oxford, and the Imperial War Museum to verify and contextualize the discoveries. Perhaps most importantly, Their plan included provisions for honoring the German resistance figures whose activities were documented in Prince George's papers. Many of these individuals had died during the war, but some had surviving family members who deserved to know about their relatives' heroic actions. The revelation of Prince George's intelligence work would also serve as recognition of these brave individuals who had risked everything to oppose Nazi tyranny from within. The media strategy was designed to control the pace and tone of disclosure while maximizing the positive impact on both historical understanding and royal family reputation. Rather than a sudden revelation that might seem defensive or reactive, the plan called for a structured series of announcements and scholarly publications that would gradually educate the public about Prince George's true role in the war effort. 3 weeks later, the first phase of their plan was implemented, when Catherine, accompanied by James and Dr. Harrison, presented their findings to a closed session with senior royals and government officials. The response was more positive than anyone had dared hope, with the Queen herself expressing pride in her uncle's courage and stating that the time for unnecessary secrets has passed. The official announcement came 6 months later, timed to coincide with the anniversary of Prince George's death, and presented as a celebration of previously unrecognized wartime heroism rather than a response to potential scandal. The revelation was accompanied by a carefully curated exhibition at the Imperial War Museum and a scholarly publication that provided full context for the intelligence operations Prince George had conducted. James Morrison found his life transformed by these events, but not in ways he could have anticipated. Rather than facing punishment for his breach of protocol, he was commended for his discretion and judgment in handling the discovery. He was offered a position with the Royal Historical Archives, working to ensure that future historical materials were properly preserved and appropriately made available to scholars. Catherine's vision for transparency and historical honesty became a model for how the royal family approached other sensitive historical questions. The successful resolution of the Prince George situation demonstrated that acknowledging complex historical truths could actually strengthen rather than weaken public respect for the monarchy. The broader impact of the revelations extended far beyond royal family reputation. Historians gained new insights into World War II intelligence operations and German resistance activities. Family members of German resistance fighters received long-overdue recognition for their relative sacrifices, and the public gained a more nuanced understanding of the moral complexities faced by individuals caught between loyalty and conscience during wartime. Harrison's academic analysis of the documents revealed previously unknown details about intelligence operations that had helped shorten the war and save lives. The information also provided new evidence about the German resistance movement, contributing to a more complete understanding of opposition to Nazi rule within Germany itself. James often reflected on the chain of events that had led from Catherine's fainting spell to this historical revelation. A moment of medical crisis had led to the discovery of a key, which had led to the uncovering of hidden truth, which had ultimately led to historical justice for individuals who had been forgotten by official accounts of the war. The ornate brass key now resided in a place of honor in the Royal Archives, accompanied by a complete record of how its secrets had been discovered and revealed. The inscription, Veritas Liberabit Vos, had proven prophetic in ways that none of the participants could have imagined. The truth had indeed set them free, not just from the burden of keeping unnecessary secrets, but from the assumption that historical honesty and institutional loyalty were necessarily in conflict. Catherine's health episode had initially seemed like a crisis to be managed and forgotten. Instead, it had become the catalyst for one of the most significant historical discoveries of the modern era. James Morrison's decision to investigate, rather than simply return a lost key, had transformed him from a palace guard into a guardian of historical truth. The hidden room in the East Wing was eventually unsealed and converted into a proper archive space, ensuring that Prince George's documents would be preserved for future generations of researchers. But more importantly, the entire experience had demonstrated that sometimes the most important discoveries come not from extensive planning or official investigations, but from ordinary people making extraordinary choices in moments of unexpected opportunity. The palace settled back into its normal rhythms, but with a new understanding that transparency and historical honesty were not threats to royal dignity, but expressions of it. The secret that had been kept for over 70 years had finally been revealed, and the world was richer for the knowing of it. James Morrison continued his duties at Kensington Palace, but with the knowledge that he had helped write history rather than simply witnessing it. The key in his pocket had opened more than just a hidden door. It had opened minds, healed old wounds, and proven that sometimes the most profound changes come from the smallest acts of courage and conscience. The truth, as the inscription had promised, had indeed set them all free.